Today's experience was sent to us by a one-time Imam, a dedicated Muslim cleric. He died, went to hell, was revealed hidden Islamic secret and future agenda against the world. But as of when he sent this, he is a born-again Christian. Listen to his experience and be enlightened. My name is Rabiu Kalma. I was born into a devout Muslim family from Pakistan. We lived in a tight-knit community where Islam wasn't just a religion but a way of life. My parents ensured I was raised with a deep reverence for God, the Prophet Muhammad, and the teachings of the Quran. Every day before dawn, I would wake up to the call to prayer, far, and join my family in prayer. It was a routine that became second nature to me. By the time I was 7, I had already memorized large portions of the Quran. I attended Islamic classes, where we were taught not only how to recite the verses but also the meanings behind them. The Quran was presented as the ultimate truth, the unquestionable word of God. As a child, I accepted this wholeheartedly. My faith was strong, and I believed that Islam was the one true path. The thought of questioning it never even crossed my mind. My family was my world, and their faith was mine. When we moved to the West, everything changed. But I remember the culture shock. Life in America was different. People didn't always understand our customs or our faith, and sometimes they were curious, but other times, they were judgmental. I attended a public school, and that's when the questions began. My classmates would ask me why I prayed 5 times a day, why my mother wore a hijab, and whether I believed in Jesus. At first, I didn't know how to answer. My Islamic upbringing hadn't prepared me for the complexities of living in a Western society. Gradually, I learned to navigate these conversations, defending my faith while trying to fit in. My Islamic identity became something I had to protect. I clung to it even more fiercely in this unfamiliar land. I remember sitting in the school cafeteria, silently saying Bismillah before eating, while my friends around me ate without a second thought. Every action, every decision seemed to carry the weight of representing my religion. I was Muslim, and that defined who I was. As I grew older, I became more aware of the way Islam was viewed in the West. News headlines were often filled with stories that painted Muslims in a negative light, and that hurt. I wanted people to understand that Islam was a religion of peace, of submission to God, not the violent, radical ideology that was often portrayed. I began to take pride in being the one who could correct their misconceptions. By the time I was in high school, I started having more serious discussions about faith, particularly with my Christian friends. We would debate late into the night, comparing beliefs and challenging each other. I was confident in my faith and enjoyed defending Islam against what I saw as the flawed logic of Christianity. The idea that Jesus was both God and man made no sense to me. I believed in Jesus as a prophet, but the notion of him being divine or the Son of God seemed contradictory to the strict monotheism I had been taught. I remember one particular conversation with a friend named Andrew. He was a devout Christian, and we would often go back and forth about our beliefs. He'd tell me about the love of Christ, how Jesus died for our sins, and how salvation was only through him. I, in turn, would argue that Islam was the final revelation, that the Quran superseded previous scriptures, and that salvation came through submission to Allah and doing good deeds. Our debates were intense but always respectful. At that time, I believed that defending Islam was not only my duty but also a way to strengthen my faith. In my final year, I was appointed by the school administration to be the Imam of the school mosque based on my Islamic qualifications and knowledge. The day of the accident is one I'll never forget. It had been a stressful day at college, and I was mentally exhausted. I had stayed late to finish an assignment, and by the time I got into my car to head home, the sun was already setting. The roads were slick from rain earlier in the day, and I remember feeling unusually tired. As I drove, my mind wandered. I was thinking about the debate I had earlier with another friend about religion, replaying the arguments in my head, try to come up with better responses.
Suddenly, everything went dark.
There was a deafening crash, and my body was thrown violently inside the car. I don't remember much after that, just the sensation of pain, sharp and immediate, before everything went numb. I don't know how long I lay there, but at some point, I realized I was dying. I could feel my body shutting down, my consciousness slipping away. Then, something strange happened. It was as if I was no longer in my body. I felt myself floating, rising above the wreckage. I could see my car below, twisted and mangled, and my lifeless body inside. But I wasn't alone. There was a force, a pull, something drawing me away from the scene, pulling me into darkness. Was confused, terrified.
I had always believed that when a Muslim dies, they are greeted by angels who take them to be judged by Allah.
But there were no angels. Instead, I felt a sense of fear, as if I was being dragged into something far worse than I could have imagined. As it finally lifted, what lay before me was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. It was a landscape of endless torment, a vast, desolate wasteland, but it wasn't empty. Everywhere I looked, there were souls in anguish, screaming in pain. They weren't just crying out in pain. Their voices were filled with a desperation. Some tried to crawl away from the flames that burns at their bodies, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape. The fire was alive, consuming them over and over, yet never letting them die. They were trapped in an unending cycle of torment. Above me were demons. I watched in horror as they tormented those souls, and the torment never stopped. I stood frozen, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening. How could I be here? I had lived my life as a faithful Muslim, following the teachings of the Quran, praying, fasting, giving to charity. This was supposed to be the fate of unbelievers, not someone like me. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to make sense of it all, but there were no answers. The demons surrounded me. They taunted me, laughing at my confusion and fear. "You thought you were safe, didn't you?" one of them asked me. "You thought your prayers and your fasting would save you." "Fool," it spat. "This is where you belong." The words it uttered shook me to my core. In its cold, grating voice, the demon let me know that everything I had believed, everything I had placed my faith in, had been a deception. Islam, it revealed, was not what I had thought. The religion I had devoted my entire life to was not the path to God, but rather a carefully crafted illusion, a means to divert souls like mine away from the truth. The demon explained that Islam had been inspired by their master, their dark lord, to lead the unsuspecting into damnation. I was frozen in disbelief, unable to grasp what I was hearing. How could it be? I had followed Islam faithfully, devoted myself to its teachings, lived my life according to its commandments. Yet here I was, tormented in a place I had never imagined could be my fate. The demon's words echoed in my mind, each one slicing deeper into the foundation of everything I thought I knew. It mocked me for my trust in good deeds, for believing that my prayers, fasting, and charity would save me. It ridiculed the very notion that I had been working toward eternal paradise when, in fact, I had been heading straight for this place all along. My attempts to live righteously, to follow the path of Islam, had been futile, a grand deception from the very start. The demon let me know that I had been blind, just like millions of others. The truth had always been there, but they had made sure we couldn't see it. Jesus, this name was spoken with disdain, was the way to salvation, but the forces at play had blinded me and so many others to that truth. All my life, I had thought I was following the correct path, but according to this demonic revelation, I had been led astray. The weight of those words was unbearable, suffocating me with despair. There was no escape from the reality I was now facing. Everything I had trusted, everything I had believed in, was nothing but a cruel diversion designed to keep me, and countless others, enslaved to a false hope. The demon's sneer deepened as it reveled in my agony, taking pleasure in the torment of not just my body but my very soul. The demons made clear that their plan was far more evil than I had ever imagined. They raised radical Muslims, stirring hatred, keeping them blind to the truth about Jesus. It wasn't just about misleading, it was about keeping millions in darkness, ensuring they never discovered the true path to salvation. And now, I was one of them, one of the damned, ensnared in their eternal trap. Time lost all meaning in that place. I don't know how long I remained there, surrounded by darkness and agony. Every moment felt like an eternity, and yet, somewhere in the depths of my suffering, something shifted. It was subtle at first, a faint presence that I couldn't quite place. But as the torment around me continued, I began to sense it more clearly, a light. The light pierced through the overwhelming darkness, not with blinding intensity but with a gentle, peaceful radiance. It wasn't like anything I had seen before. It didn't belong to this place of suffering. The demons recoiled from it, their mocking laughter silenced for the first time. And then, in that moment, I realized something that had been hidden from me all my life. It wasn't the deeds, the prayers, or the submission that led to salvation. The truth I had been kept from, the truth that had been obscured by deception, became clear. Jesus was the way. It was as if the light itself carried the truth directly into my soul, washing away the lies that had kept me in darkness for so long. I had spent my entire life striving, working, believing that my efforts would lead me to paradise, but it had never been enough. The peace I had longed for wasn't something I could earn. It was something that had been offered freely all along. Jesus, whom I had been taught was only a prophet, was the very key to everything, the path to the heaven I had sought but never truly understood. I don't know how I returned from that place, but when I did, I was in the hospital for days. I knew my life had changed forever. My heart ached for my fellow Muslims. I knew that they, like me, believed they were on the right path. They were sincere, devout, and committed to living righteous lives, but they didn't know the truth. I had to tell them. I had to let them know that good deeds, no matter how many, wouldn't save them. I had been deceived, and so had they. The path we had trusted in, the religion we had followed with devotion, was not the path to God. Jesus was the only way to salvation. This was the truth that had been hidden from us, the truth that the forces of darkness had worked so hard to keep us from seeing. At the same time, I came to realize that Christians also had a responsibility in this. Too often, I had seen Christians treat Muslims with suspicion or outright hatred. Many of them had no understanding of Islam and saw Muslims as enemies, rather than people who needed the truth. They didn't show love, the very thing Jesus commanded them to show. How could they reach Muslims if they approached them with fear or animosity? The message of the gospel wasn't meant to be delivered with hostility. It was meant to be shared with love, patience, and understanding. Christians needed to see Muslims not as outsiders, but as lost souls who were just as in need of Jesus as anyone else. Instead of turning away, they needed to engage with Muslims, to break down the walls of misunderstanding and mistrust. I realized that the more they showed love and lived out the teachings of Jesus, the more likely it was that Muslims would begin to see the truth. The answer wasn't in debates or arguments. It was in embodying the love and compassion of Christ. I felt called to admonish both Muslims and Christians. To my Muslim brothers and sisters, I would say, open your hearts, question what you've been taught, and seek the truth. Don't be blinded by what you've always believed. Be open to the possibility that Jesus is more than what you think he is. To my Christian friends, I would plead, stop seeing Muslims as enemies. Show them the love of Christ, not through words alone but through your actions, your compassion, your willingness to understand. That's how hearts would be changed. Thank you for staying to the end of this experience.
Save a soul by sharing this video with your friends and families, so that they will be saved from the path of hell.
Subscribe to our channel if you have not, to remain updated whenever we share another experience that is being sent to us. Thank you.